Live from Los Angeles, welcome back to Good Morning La La Land. I'm so excited to welcome to the show Ben Ivey, a.k.a. the Fulfillment Artist on #Wealth Wednesday. Thank you for being with us today.
Of course, my pleasure.
So tell us about your journey to becoming an expert in what you do.
Great question. So I ran a couple of businesses before, and then I was based in Silicon Valley. And then, similar to, I'm sure, yourselves, I had a really life-changing incident for me, which is, I lost one of my best friends, which was my dad to suicide. And I saw him the day before, and it just completely shook my world. So I quit the business, handed it off to a new CEO, and I started to dive in.
Slow down. Your dad committed suicide?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was that like for you?
Oh, that was, obviously an incredibly difficult experience.
Oh my gosh,
And yeah, I mean, when I share my story, and I'm sharing it in Chinese in April, it's very fascinating just to see how impactful it is when you start to speak to people, imagining their hero, and then they just disappear. So for me, after that happened, I started to dive into, number one, why it happened, and number two is it just my dad that had these patterns, or are there other people as well? And reading your book, it seemed that you certainly had suicidal thoughts as well. And I found
a decade.
That,
it was very, very fun.
And it's been fascinating diving into, all these different, from neurolinguistic programming, Tony Robbins and what he does, and working out, how do you really shift people very quickly? Because I wanted to, go on this mission to be able to help people that were in the worst place of their life and shift them as quickly as possible. So, now I've managed to get the techniques and started to obviously, run events in different places to be able to help people with this. And it's just been a very fascinating journey just to understand people's psychology.
But this was kind of like the topic that we're talking about today. I mean, how do you shift? How going to that dark place, whether it's a little dark place or a lot of dark place, how do you shift out of that? And I think that people come to professionals to help them do that. But the issue for me, I find that is, we can teach them, but at some point, they have to individually go, okay, and now I'm going to use the tool that I learned at this conference or with this coach or with whatever, and they're going to implement it.
They have to do their own push-ups.
They have to do their own push-ups, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could, I use an example of Everest, right? You can show them people the quickest way there, but you can't, take them on your shoulders and walk them up there. They have to take responsibility for their lives. So you have to use different techniques depending on the people that you work with, but ultimately, I think in life, you get to a point where you decide enough is enough and you start to make that change. And then from that moment, it's making those consistent practices. So when I work with people that are suicidal, or I work with people that are very depressed, it's getting them to that point where enough is enough and they start to switch things. And even our language, I had a conversation with a client the other day who was saying, I just feel, I'm really depressed. And I said, are you, or are you doing depression? And it's such a fascinating way in which to
describe the difference in that.
Sure. So when you say I am, and you have something after it, how could you be anything different? So whether you say, I'm such a perfectionist, or you say, I am like this way, you can't be any different. Whereas if you say you're doing depression, it's a behavior. And that you have the ability to change because it's not part of who you think you are and your own identity. Identity is probably the biggest thing that I work with clients. It's fascinating.
I just love this, and I love your work, and I love the point you're making there, sort of around language, not just describing your life, but it dictates your destiny in a way. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of your favorite tips, tricks, and techniques for getting people to make that shift?
Sure. So the biggest thing that I do is I ask someone, who are you? And most people don't know a bloody clue because no one really asked you that. And then I ask them, who must they become in order to live the life that they want? And then we start to dive into what are the traits, what are the behaviors, and how do you have to be if you were that person already? Because often people have to believe they have to do a certain thing in order to be a certain way. When I get to the island, then I'll be this and this and this. So actually working on their being and who they are right now, and then emulating whatever that is and moving that forward is probably one of the best things that I see with clients, and it's fascinating.
Oh, I just love this. One of the first books that really changed my life was Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God. He talks about reversing this sort of pattern that we've all accepted, which is that you need to do in order to have so that you can be or feel something. He talked about reversing that so that you put being first, feeling first, and then doing from that place, and then you have other things. Talk just a little bit about that. So once you've done this sort of identity conditioning process, what would you say is the hardest part for people to kind of wrap their head around? Is it the new identity?
I think the hardest part is that we're all humans, right? So we're built for survival. So the mind is always looking for things that are wrong. You're always worried about certain things. And we ask ourselves a lot of shitty questions sometimes as well. So I think ultimately, something that I share with people is similar to, you go to the gym every day to work out your body. You want to work out your mind in the same way. So whether it's gratitude or conditioning that identity, and then once you do it enough, it just becomes easy and it just becomes like naturally part of you as opposed to something that you're trying to be.
It's a good point. I've noticed that one of the things that people seem challenged most by is they say, oh, this new way of thinking and being feels inauthentic. It feels like not me. And I often say, well, it just feels unfamiliar. So how do you help people with that when they say, I want to embrace this new identity and I can see how constructive it would be, but it feels inauthentic?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And how often do people say that? You fake it till you make it. And how long can I fake it till I'm actually there?
A long time, let me tell you. A long time.
So yeah, with regards to that, I think the biggest thing that I say to them is, it's just being, right? Like, be generous. Like, what do you have to do that? You know what I mean? And I think it's just getting those small wins and those small successes and acknowledging them. Yeah. Because how often do we want these big successes or these big things to happen, and then we decide, okay, now I'm that way. Now I'm a grateful person, and now I'm contributing because I'm affecting 1 million people. Right? Affect one person at a time, and that will help you move forward.
So I'm curious to know, because look, a lot of the spiritual work, all of it is an identity shift. That's the entire work of spiritual work. You're awfully young to know some of these distinctions, quite frankly. Do you feel like you are enlightened, if you will? Because there's somebody to teach somebody about these distinctions and have them kind of begin to embody something. And there's a shift of someone who's actually kind of experienced themselves as the greatest identity shift, the I am experience. Do you feel like you've had a major awakening, or do you feel like it's just this motivational distinctions that have transformed your life?
Well, I think I wouldn't say I've had a major awakening. I'm enlightened. I'd never say something like that. I think ultimately I'm very aware of people's patterns, and I think that when you look in different people in life, whether it's the West or the East, I think what I've been very fortunate about is that I've been exposed to people at the top in San Francisco. I've been exposed to a lot of very wealthy people in China. But what's most fascinating is seeing the common patterns between them, and just through that exposure has allowed me to gain the skills to work with some very successful people that are just feeling incredibly lost in their lives.
Yeah, your consciousness is it's on point. Very good.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
And I don't think it'd be too much to say you're awakened or enlightened. I think that that's some far off thing that we think that only the masters or only the whatever, and I don't think that that's true. I think that it can happen right here, right now for anybody.
I agree with what you're saying. I think what I'm most wary of is the language that people use, and often what people associate, with God or enlightenment or something like that can bring negativity to people because of how it's used, especially out in China as an example. So I've become extra aware of the language that I use, as you can well imagine.
So tell us about that. What's the difference between here and China? What's so different about
what isn't the difference? I mean, it's completely, they're just worlds apart.
Worlds apart.
I'm the social media is obviously completely different. The language, the way in which people interact. They talk about something called guanxi, which is like building relationships with people. And often you'll do business with someone that you build a relationship with, as opposed to what the best cost-benefit analysis is.
Yeah.
And it's very fascinating to see that you'll go to a business meeting, they'll take you out for lunch, and actually this is quite funny. So when I first started dating my girlfriend, who's Taiwanese, I couldn't tell the distinction between, as a British person, when I get food, I finish everything that's on my plate, because that's what you do as a British person. That's polite. Now in China, you overfeed people to show love, which obviously led to an issue of me gaining about 30 pounds.
I was going to say, 4 hours of a traditional
so here I am. I'm like, these people are challenging me. I'm like, all right, let's take it on. And surely my gut took a little bit too much. It took about 6 months to lose that. But there's little traditions like that, and the way you cheers someone, you have to get it lower than their glass to show respect. And there's these little things that sort of add up that you have to be a little bit more aware of as such.
Love that.
That's so interesting.
Well, you're a very evolved soul, in my opinion.
Thank you very much.
How can people work with you?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm on different social media platforms, WeChat in China, and then the usual ones that most people are on. I don't really use Twitter that much because I just, that's not for me.
Yeah.
But
do you do one-on-one? Do you do groups? Do you do training?
So I do one-on-ones. I do everything online because of my schedule. And then I run events as well. So I run events in China and I run events in the UK. And it's cool because I have trainers that are running my events as well now. And we're starting to do them in Chinese and starting to move forward.
Scale up.
So yeah, it's a challenge in and of itself. Doing them in Chinese, didn't think that was going to happen quite so soon. But yeah, it's a great challenge to have. It's a good problem.
Well, congratulations.
Absolutely.
So
thank you very
happy for
much.
everything. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.